Hello everybody, my name is Fabled Ways and I'm here to test out or check out the new Final Fantasy XVI trailer. I don't know why I said test out, but I don't want to do the take again. So basically this came out, when was it now? Like 5 days ago. And originally I wanted to record a reaction, but the moment I watched it live with my free company on Final Fantasy XIV, I forgot to record it, so this is kind of my reaction to it. Or reaction, I suppose, because I have seen it. I did see it live. I did get excited. And there's actually a couple of points where I will pause and I will do that. And I will actually also talk a little bit about why it worries me and why I am worried. So also, this is a new thing I'm trying out. You might see this is giant new resolution. Yes, sir. I have actually gotten an ultra-wide monitor about a month ago, and I've since then still tried to do 1080p. But I figured, hey, it's kind of a hassle to just constantly render it down to 1080p and try to make everything fit. Some bigger projects will remain 1080p, but this I'm going to try to do in ultra wide, which of course is not going to matter for this video because again, this is just in 16:9 resolution. So let's put this into big screen. Let's give it a little thing.
You all know the target. Shiva's dominant.
Okay, this is when I actually lost my crap because it is actually incredible to have seen a couple of Final Fantasies launch from the get-go, like to fully experience it and to fully go with it. So seeing this again is just incredible. I did originally think that this was going to be something Kingsglaive oriented because of the outfits, but taking a closer look at it, it wasn't much like that.
And only the dominant.
How do we even know the girl will be among us?
Our kind do not question orders, we follow them.
That's a great tackle.
Sergeant, let's summon their icon.
Icon.
Okay, now, nobody in the fucking call that I was in recognized this, but they don't pay attention to the business units and stuff like that as much as I do, considering Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy XIV and all that kinds of stuff. When I saw CBU 3, I started slamming my desk. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I actually got excited because this is yoshi-p's unit, and because I am such a massive yoshi-p fan and a fan of his work and his dedication, and of course his entire team. I don't mean to discredit specifically the team. Whenever I mention yoshi-p, I actually do mean him as a sort of like figurehead for their team. So
It's a bloody mountain.
get slammed.
Our foe will not relinquish their mother crystal easily. This will...
So looking at stuff like this, right? Immediately I'm sorry if you get annoyed by me pausing it, but I did say I would do it early on. I look at this and I can tell that it's the Luminous engine again because of the fact that this is literally the same sort of hairstyle stuff that they used for Final Fantasy XV, except that it is higher resolution. So I'm going to guess that it is more graphically dense, for example, but it's still the same Luminous engine.
be a bitter fight.
Or at least I hope so.
You should not be out of doors. We have discussed this. Come, Joshua. Your father will be expecting us.
I am Joshua's shield. I'm sworn to protect him.
What do you mean you refuse?
This character actually looks a hell of a lot like a character you can make in the game itself. I don't remember if it's a Hrothgar that people use this with, or the or one of the hero races, but well, types I say. But the head is basically like a copy paste almost, but white and a slightly more frizzled hair and more detailed hair. I actually really like that.
Did you not pledge your swords to our cause?
Okay, that part I'm actually really skeptic about, because magic was really underplayed in Final Fantasy XV, but I don't know if I like this much better, which is just that you become like a freely casting thing. I don't want to turn the whole thing into Fable 3, where you can cast magic at free will, right? Like, it's not a problem, but it kind of becomes an issue in the same way that it became an issue in Kingdom Hearts 3, where in Kingdom Hearts 3, you could spam fire. Like, you could find the strongest one and just constantly spam that. I hope they balance this out properly if they want to use it like a machine gun like here.
What does it matter? It was the Dalmex who drove back the Crusaders in the Battle of the Twin Realms, was it not?
That, I believe, is Ishtola's voice actor. 100%.
Without the blessing of the Mother Crystal, we cannot defend our realm from the spread of the Blight.
I also know this voice actor, but I can't put my finger on it, but I've heard him in previous Final Fantasy games before. No, it is not Troy Baker. No, it is not Matthew Mercer. I've heard his voice a great many times. For the life of me, I can't put my finger on it. This is actually also where I'd like to point out a little bit of the graphic fidelity being a little bit of an issue with the hair sometimes, because that's the main reason the main way I always recognize the Luminous engine, is that here it feels very, very awkward and very, very rough still with the hair. And it's like here it still looks fine, like these things, like these strands of hair. I found this to be fine, but this suffers from Final Fantasy 15 syndrome, because even when they tried to import this over into Tekken 7, Noctis ended up having this really, really sort of like sharp looking hair, as if it was razor cut, like straight down razor cut, gelled. It did not look right. It did not. Hell, I think the edge smoother, that edge smoothening software, but I'm trying to remember the name of, but I for the life of me cannot remember. But you know, I believe it had a tough time with that hair. Okay, I need to point this out again, because I heard this, and listening to it now, I actually looked it up again. There's actually a like, if you listen to the left channel of your audio, so your left ear, you will actually hear a da-da-da-da. I want to bring up the Stormblood trailer. Da-da-da-da. Stop it. I really think this is soaking on the soundtrack again, and there have been theories where this is supposed to be like another shard. I really like that theory. I actually am a big fan of it, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm hoping it's not going to be like that. But if it is, hopefully it makes sense. And they make it work in a proper way, that Final Fantasy 16 is not just a relegation to being related to Final Fantasy 14, and like Final Fantasy 14 is that big out-branching game. But essentially, if what I really want to point out with this is, if this is actually Soken's work and he's just using elite motives and stuff like that, oh, this game is going to be fantastic. I wonder though, actually I'm going to bring that up with my concerns.
So, they're sitting the Dragoons. Imperial Vipers. Do they really mean to invade us?
Those abilities look real cool though. Okay, I also want to point out, like, that scene right here. I really think that this is the most blood we've ever seen, like graphically like this, in a Final Fantasy game, which has me excited, because I'm excited for Final Fantasy as a series to be exploring more adult themes in terms of like blood and violence and that kinds of things. There's always been like implied kind of stuff, but in terms of like media, we've evolved now to a time where graphic violence and that kinds of stuff is becoming much more common. And the only series that kind of stayed behind and tried to play it in a sort of like safe, very child-friendly type of way is Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy as a series, not 16 specifically. So I'm excited for them to be taking this step further. I will say that this is actually a gripe of mine in Final Fantasy 14, where they say it's meant to be for teens, but they have stuff like whoreson and bullshite and all that kinds of stuff in the language. But if you say that, you actually can get reported. So it's fine for them to say it in the context of a story. But if you say, like, for example, something is bullshite in a raid or something, you're eligible for a report. That I don't like. So I'm hoping they're going to, but that's of course a concern for Final Fantasy 14, which is what my main channel is about. Come on now. So I'm hoping that they are going to be allowing more graphic violence and more graphic details and more coarse adult language to basically build up more of an intent and emotion. Because if you're going to try to get, for example, this guy just saw somebody get decapitated, I'm gonna guess, or at least had their head split or something, and if he just suddenly goes, "You're a poopy head," instead of like you're a shithead or something, that's not gonna build tension. That takes you away from the moment, you know what I mean? And I feel like a much more humane reaction would be to respond with vile language and in frustration, as most people would. Of course, this is based in medieval times, so the language is not as you know, common as we have it today.
It's the Archduke's son.
Phoenix.
Stop this!
Second life on a fire. But that's impossible.
So, I believe this is Alphinaud's voice actor, but you can hear him talk earlier, which I don't know if it's really Alphinaud's voice actor. That, or he just suddenly had his balls drop and he's reached puberty. Also, in the Japanese trailer, they heavily imply that Joshua has become Ifrit there with their translation, whereas in the English one they're a bit more subtle with it. Which when I watched it the first time, I actually didn't get the idea that Joshua was meant to be that. How about that? That is the most common font type in the Final Fantasy history books. Fucking Final Fantasy 14 uses this one way too often. I actually have it installed now for my thumbnails and that kind of stuff. I'm probably gonna use it for this one as well. So it's kind of funny that they went for this one again.
Crystals. Has shaped our history.
So we've seen I'm gonna guess the protagonist, the guy with the black hair. We've seen him take many different outfits. So I'm gonna guess outfit customization is back, because when we saw him brawling with his fists earlier, he had a sort of like more ninja-ish, rogue-like sort of outfit going on with like the draped scarf and that kind of stuff around his neck and around his shoulder. Whereas now, we see him with a more laid and like slick attire, so I'm gonna hope customization in that regard is still there.
Enough. I'll kill you. If it's the last thing I do.
And also coming to PC at a later point. Which, oof. Okay, so I quickly want to point out, from all of the stuff in regards to the music, I definitely think that this is going to be Soken composed, or at least directed in some way, shape, or form, because this has his music style written all over it. Alex McCalla, did I say that right? Yeah, Alex McCalla actually did an analysis, I believe, on this, and he is much more musically gifted than I am. Here's, for example, the outfit that I was talking about just now. He's wearing a different outfit than we had before. Yeah, see? And then if we go to here... See, like, we have a different outfit there. It is a different suit. So I'm gonna hope customization part by part is a thing. Maybe we get to customize the character way more, because aside from the voice, we haven't really heard much from the character. Like, he's just kind of here to tend to the chocobo for a moment. But aside from that, that's really it. People have pointed out that this chocobo looks very much so like the Not a toucan. You get what I mean. The bird from Shadowbringers that follows you around everywhere. Could that have been a hidden reference all along? Could that have been a secret little note for it? I don't know. I don't know if you can go as deeply as that just because he looks like that. I don't know if you could pull that from that because here it just looks, you know, like any other chocobo really, that with a mild frown, of course, but you know. What else is there? I was excited for the trailer. I was blown away by it actually. Much of the PS5 press conference blew me away. Aside from Deathloop, which that was the one thing I did not enjoy too much. But I will say I've soured on the PS5 release now that... Oh man, how do I best put this? It's the fact that the price was okay, right? I'm not upset at the price. The price is very acceptable and very, very fair in my opinion. And the hardware definitely supports it. Like if I could install Windows on an Xbox, the new Xbox or the PS5, it would beat out my PC most likely. But what bothers me is that they've now also decided to charge more for games. And we're heading towards $70 per game. And in fact, in Europe, that's going to head up to $80 because that's going to have tax included, whereas in US prices that go up to 70, those are, I believe, calculated without tax in mind. So this is going to actually be a massive, massive amount of money that we're going to have to shell out for games sometimes. I don't like it. So that might be the only reason I don't get a PS5 is because I'm just tired. I'm just tired of the constant increasing price of like console games and that kinds of stuff, because the whole point of getting a console in the past was you want to get something that's cheaper than building a computer. I've always been an advocate. If you don't have a lot of money, just get a console. Stop listening to people that will tell you like, oh, PC master race. Sure, you can do more with a PC at the end of the day, but if you don't have the means for it, then it's absolutely no problem. Play with what you want to and play the way you like, right? But the increase in price for games now is starting to make it much more difficult for me to find it appealing to get a console. Especially with the new generation of video cards that are coming out. So that soured me a little bit on the presentation. Right. So why does this have me concerned for Final Fantasy 16 or 14, I should say? You see, this is made, as it says right here, by CBU 3, which is Creative Business Unit 3. Creative Business Unit is the one headed by Yoshida. And Yoshida has already stated in the past that sometimes with the development of Final Fantasy 14, he's had many restless nights. Oftentimes during the PLLs, the letter from the producer live, or a producer life letter if you want to call him that. He's often said that he looks sleepless. He looks like he hasn't had a lot of sleep, and now he's not heading the project solo, I believe. He's just the producer on it and one of the lead producers, but he's still working on this a lot of time. And I respect that. I fully support his decisions to do so. But my problem is that is he also going to be able to contribute as much effort towards Final Fantasy 14? Because at the end of the day, Final Fantasy 14 is still a subscription-based game that at the end of the day, we do want more quality content for. And if people do not like it, I haven't checked the financial reports, and they're not my business either. I don't really like to check into it, but from what I understand and from what I gather, Final Fantasy 14 is still the main way for them to make money on a consistent basis, aside from like the last biggest moneymaker, I believe, would have been Final Fantasy 7 remake. Yeah, 7 remake, part 1 at least. And when part 2 comes out, it's inevitably going to make them a lot of money as well. But Final Fantasy 14 has been the sort of like steady line of like finances for Square Enix. And I would even go so far as to credit Final Fantasy 14 and the entire team behind it to basically restore the credibility from Square Enix at times when it comes to the production of the game, especially with 14's re-release in A Realm Reborn. But now that we have to split the team, specifically from what I understand, a lot of the CBU 3 team working on this game is the one that's primarily also worked on Heavensward. And that's good. I like Heavensward. But I'm hoping that they have not taken away some of the excellent team members that have made Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers as great as it is. And I gotta be honest, I don't want to rant on the quality of Final Fantasy XIV too much, but the last patch, right, I'm gonna be honest, was not great. The last couple of patches have not been great. It feels like ever since the release of Shadowbringers, they've just kind of like told the best writers of the team to just kind of get a break. And the moment they actually needed them to write something interesting, like for example, from what I understand, the woman that wrote the Shadowbringers main storyline that also did the Dark Knight quest line ended up being only recruited for the final story, 5.3 patch, and the 5.2 patch main story. I'm not entirely sure about 5.2, but definitely for 5.3, or at least the finale of the Shadowbringers storyline. And those were good. Like the Shadowbringers main plotline and the 5.3 plotline, those were they were incredible, right? I'm trying hard not to cuss, but they were absolutely incredible, very heart-wrenching even, which was, even for villains that only had just shown up, they wrote incredibly good storylines and it made a lot of sense. And even then they made compelling like villains at the end of the day, even if they only had like 2, 3, maybe like a little bit before before the actual expansion came out. They had like a couple of appearances, but the moment we actually had to deal with them, the villains, even then they were compelling victims in such a little time, and that in my opinion is a feat. But that CBU3 Heavensward team includes the person, like I'm not sure about this, right? But from the way that it's said, like, oh, if it really is the Heavensward team, that includes the person who did the Dark Knight storyline quest, which they did the Shadowbringer storyline as well. I can't remember her name right now, but she did an absolutely amazing job writing the Shadowbringer storyline, and I'm hoping that they did not take her away, because right now is the point in the story where we're going to need to build the most, because you're basically grabbing an old villain in Xenos. Sorry if that spoils you, but we're basically going back to the whole Xenos Alamegan plotline of like, Garlean plotline, and man, I really was not at all interested in in bringing that all back. Banri Oda and Natsuko Ishikawa. Okay, Natsuko Ishikawa is the person that is responsible for the main scenario writing. Of course, the whole writing team deserves respect, but Natsuko Ishikawa she deserves all the praise in the entire world for writing the story, and probably the Heavensward was always the best story. Now we've got Shadowbringers, which is an absolutely better story. It's incredible. But I'm hoping that person, Natsuko, is not included with this team, and they instead have different writers for it, as to not make Final Fantasy XIV suffer as a result. Because now's the time when we need good writing, because we need a compelling reason to pick up the next expansion, which we inevitably next year are going to have to do. Now, I did say what are some of the things I'm looking forward to for this game in relation to Final Fantasy XIV. There have been many theories that this is actually just another shard in like in the universe of Final Fantasy 15. And if they actually end up doing that, I'm not fully supportive of the idea, because I kind of want Final Fantasy 16 to stand on its own. But if it is just kind of like a nice little neat detail that this is canon in the Final Fantasy 14 lore, I'm curious how far they're going to take that kinds of stuff, and if they're going to make back references and even make cameos. Judging by the fact that this has the CBU3 team, we're going to automatically expect crossover stuff, right? In no way, shape, or fucking form are they not going to have crossover stuff. It's going to be an event. It's going to be glamour. It's going to be, I don't know, maybe they'll even include a new class. Probably not, but they're going to do a lot for this crossover event. I'm hoping, desperately hoping that this game is going to be a massive success in putting Final Fantasy 16 back, or as the Final Fantasy series as a whole, back on the map and being a single player gem of a game series, because Final Fantasy 15 did not do a lot of favors. Final Fantasy 13, especially in the Western audiences, did not do a lot of good. So a lot of people have soured on the Final Fantasy solo game series, whereas Final Fantasy 14 has done a good job of bringing it for the MMO stuff. 13 to 15 did not do a lot for it. 12 even arguably as well, but I am biased towards 12, so I'm not going to crap on that game. If Final Fantasy 16 succeeds to be an excellent game, then this is just another pin in like another feather in the cap for Yoshida and the team, because they deserve it. God, do they deserve it. If there ever is a team that deserves this more than ever, it's this team. I want them to have the bragging rights of both putting the MMOs back on the map and putting the single player team back on the map. I want CBU 3 to be the golden gem of Square Enix, because I believe they deserve it, and I believe, hell, most people don't realize that if Naoki Yoshida is actually going to direct this game. He's only the producer, he said, but I'm sure he plays more of a role. He's just trying to downplay it a little bit. If he's heading this game, this is his first single player game that he's heading. I want people to realize that the MMO that he headed is an MMO, and you design an MMO differently from a single player standalone game. In fact, Final Fantasy XIV was a rework of an original thing. This is an entirely original work. I'm so excited, and I'm so hoping that this succeeds. And hell, maybe we'll even see improvements to Final Fantasy XIV as a result. They'll go like, yeah, go back to your baby and here, take this budget with you, and we'll just get more and more stuff. But yeah, that's just wishful thinking. But yeah, aside from that, really excited for this. I'm not going to get the PS5. At this moment, I'm kind of still on the fence on getting it, but I'm basically deciding at the moment that I'm not getting a PS5, at least not on the release. Maybe later down the line, but at least like for now, I'm not going to get it. That means that Final Fantasy 16 is also not going to be on my playing list for a really long time, because this is a limited time exclusive. I don't know what that means in terms of time and how long it's going to take them to release this for the PC. I'm hoping that it's not a lot of time, but that's not for me to decide. Man, I've really already said that everything that I wanted to, really, because I've kind of been just like ranting on and on. Yeah, I'm just, you know what? I think that's fine. I think you guys got my result. I think you got my reaction. I think you got my thoughts. Man. I'm going to be working on a couple of more videos. I'm going to take my time with them, because college is kind of whooping my ass, because I did not expect the scheduling to be as heavy as it is. It's not too difficult, but it's a fun type of new difficulty in my college, new college course. So hopefully I'll be able to get around to making more videos. I've got a pretty big video plan that's going to basically encapsulate the Shadowbringer story, along with a cover from Bonnie Tyler, Holding Out for a Hero by Little V. That's all I'm going to say about that. For now, I'll just leave it at this. My name is Fabled Ways. Thank you very much for sitting through this extremely lengthy video, and I'll see you hopefully again soon. And otherwise check out some of the other videos. Who knows, maybe you'll like something.